Sustainability Tidbits for SPTV. We're currently on top of the Health Enhancement Center in the University of Stevens Point, Wisconsin. And the solar thermal panels that are sitting right next to me are producing no electricity for the Health Enhancement Center right now. This is because the solar mining company, the firm that installed these 11 years ago, went bankrupt 2 years after installing these solar panels. And because of that, they forgot to connect them to the grid.
These solar thermal panels have been sitting up here on the Health Enhancement Center for 11 years, not producing any heat for the pool, which was their original purpose. Because of the 11-year wait period, multiple consultants and private companies have deemed the panels inefficient in meeting the heating needs of the swimming pool in the HEC. The payback rate on the thermal panels are just too long, and costs for removal are very high. The university may just have to eat the $15,300 investment and regard the panels as a sunk cost.
On the other hand, you can see the solar thermal panels on the campus, and they are up and running. They're preheating all of your domestic water usage in the dormitories. So next time you're in the shower, thank your local solar panel. So, where is the future of renewable energy going in the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point? Do we have a chance of being 100% renewable in the future?
And why is it taking the university so long to take down these solar panels? Let's talk to Dave Barbier, the head of the Office of the Sustainability on campus, to learn more.
My name is Dave Barbier. I am the Sustainability Coordinator here on campus. The Office of Sustainability was formed in the fall of 2013, which was shortly after I was hired. I was brought on in July of 2013, and the office sort of came along with my hiring, essentially. Right now, we're working on a variety of different things. One of them we just started work on today, actually, really with a faculty from Tree Haven, and that is going to be on a reassessment of our carbon sequestration of our managed forest lands to try and get a more precise number on how much carbon we're actually sequestering through there. So that'll start work probably sometime in December or January. So that's one of our projects that is just sort of ongoing. We're also in the process of finishing our greenhouse gas emission reporting for last fiscal year. So we'll be updating that sometime probably in November. We're still waiting from some energy data from the state on that before we can finish that. So that's another project. We're working on a more focused green map or sustainability map of the campus. Well, they heat all of the water. It's a matter of how long it lasts and what time of year, you know, and when people are taking showers. So essentially, when students go to turn their hot water on in the residential halls, they're getting, you know, solar heated hot water, essentially. But then there's also, you know, a supply and demand issue that, you know, the system is set up for, so that way when you know, one runs out, the heating plant, hot water kicks in and follows it up. So, well, in terms of PV, there's very little. There's some on the NFAC building on the south side within the windows, and those are actually pretty non-traditional. They look like small microchips within the window. And so they're used to they're used to power some of the lights within the atrium of the NFAC building, and then there's the solar thermal on the residential. I know that we burn coal because we're contracted by the state to do so, and we're actually in the process of trying to see if we can get out of doing that. What the percentage is for our energy here, you know, our coal use mainly happens in the winter, so we burn about 3,000, I think it's around 3,000 tons of coal that we're contracted on average. I think some years we've been down to 2,300 tons, and like I said, the one year when natural gas was so cheap we didn't burn any. I do know that from an electricity perspective, our portfolio's changed quite a bit since I got here. So when I arrived, we were at about 19% renewable electricity, and then the rest was based on fossil fuel, coal mainly. And since then, we've been able to find when we were purchasing RECs at that time when I got here, we were paying about $24 per renewable energy credit. Well, when the contract for that came up, we rebid it and found a much cheaper vendor that we went from paying about $24 to about $1.04. So it's a pretty significant reduction. And so that boosted our renewable electricity quite a bit for spending the same amount of money. And so right now, we're estimating that for this past fiscal year, we'll probably have been at around 58 to 60% renewable electricity, with a breakdown of about 30% coming from our own purchases, or a little bit more than that, for renewable energy credits. And then so that puts us right in around that 58, 59 range, depending on how things play out. And our renewable energy credit cost is actually went down. It's going to be, I think, if I remember correctly, Shelley said it's going to be at about 96 cents a rec. So we're hoping that for this next fiscal year, that'll probably put us at about 68 to 70% of our electricity will be from renewable sources. So that's a pretty good number. By percentage, it's by far the best out of any UW. They were supposed to go in to help heat the pool in the HEC, so more solar thermal hot water. The company that we had contracted through with the state during the middle of installation went bankrupt or out of business. And so they pretty much got them to the point of getting them on their roof, and then walked away from the project and just said, "Oh, they're yours to deal with, have at it." And you'll even see when you get up there, there are stands up for more panels that never got actually installed. And so they sat there for a long time because it was really nobody's project at that point. So they've been there for quite a while. And then in our latest power or energy service company audit, we had them specifically look at those solar panels and sort of figure out the viability of getting them installed and what it would cost and what's the return on investment. And long story short, they did not fit the state guidelines of like 16 years for return on investment. In 16 years, if you know anything about business and return on investment, like that's a huge window. Most businesses are like, I want my ROI in 2 or 3 years. Right. So the fact that it couldn't get done in 16 years is kind of like, okay, well, then there's some serious consideration about whether or not it's worth doing at all. And so, my boss at the beginning of last year or maybe last summer, said to me, figure it out. Like, I either want them put into use, found another purpose, or get them off the roof. But let's get to a conclusion on this. So we started looking at some different scenarios for where we might go with them. Could we get them to MREA? Who's going to pay the cost for that? Where would they go? And also thinking about what sort of marketing story we could tell out of that. Facilities here. Was at a realization the easiest thing for them is just going to be to take them down and recycle them and get rid of them, and that could be done, and that was probably about a $10,000 or $12,000 project to do. From my perspective, dealing with sustainability, I try and focus on reuse and collaboration as much as possible. So through some communication, I was in contact with an instructor at Mid-State Technical College, and they have a renewable installation certification and an energy program. And so our facilities director was, in the process of trying to figure out when they were going to get removed, and I, sort of brought up what about this as a collaboration idea? If they want to pay part of the cost and we can pay part of the cost, and then they could use them and they'll have a new home for educational purposes because their students will benefit from that, and so on and so forth. And so the facilities director here, Paul Hassler, said, okay, let's, I understand that that's a better purpose than just recycling them. Let's see what we can do to make that work. And so we started working with Mid-State to try and collaborate on that process. The contractor who we were working with subsequently got really busy, and our job is relatively small from that contractor's perspective, and so we weren't getting quite as quick a feedback from them as we wanted. And then sort of while this was going on or coming about, the state budget issues sort of came up last spring, and so we got to a point where we didn't really have a definitive answer, and then it also became a question of it was still going to cost us a number of thousands of dollars just to get them off the roof, even if we just did recycle them. And so it became a question of like, well, do we want to use that money there, or do we want to save that money because we're facing large budget cuts and we might need to use it somewhere else? And so essentially, because of some of the miscommunication with the contractor and the collaboration, that sort of process slowed things down. And then the budget sort of situation sort of cemented that slowdown to just be like, okay, we're not even going to deal with it right now because we just don't have the money. And other than their obvious sort of misrepresentation for people who are unaware, there's really no harm in them being there. So people see them up there and then go, oh, well, look, there's solar up there. And it's like, yeah, that's unfortunate that is the reality. I mean, one of the nice things about it for me is like thinking about the fact of all of the other panels that are on residential living are all functioning and working. So it's kind of like, it's not a complete misnomer because it's not like all the panels on the property are like that. It just happens to be that particular case. And so, there they sit. And so I'm not quite sure where they're going to go in the future. I think, a lot of it becomes a budgetary issue because, they're not like the modern module solar panels today that, you could go pick up and move around by yourself. They're a 16 or 32 foot long panel. And so it's a huge piece of equipment. I mean, they got to bring in a huge crane to get up there and lift them and bring them down. And so it's not just like pick one down and lower it down the side and there you go. So, I mean, it becomes a more complicated issue because of that. So, that in a nutshell is sort of where they've come from and where they are. And sort of, we've got the history online on our website so people can go sort of look and see what's been done with that. And so, because this has been an ongoing issue for years. Right now, we're not doing a lot to implement more renewable on campus itself. We are looking at trying to find other sources of renewable energy that can power our infrastructure as it currently is, but most of that will typically be done from off-site resources using renewable energy credits. We do have a proposal for a couple of wind turbines, which I think we talked about last time, that we're going to start looking into. In my dream world, yes, I hope so. I mean, I think it's a completely viable reality. It's just a matter of creating the vision for that and thinking about how we do that. And when does that happen is another big question. I think the status of our heating plant and whether or not those get sold to an independent provider will play a big role in that. And then at a point when the boilers in that heating plant will no longer be in a functional state, what do we do to replace them? And so that's going to be the biggest question for us getting to renewables. I think there are other universities that have implemented geothermal on a campus-wide level and are proving that that can work. So I think we have the resources available to us that we could do the same thing, and I hope that's where we go. And I think, from the scope of electricity, I think we're probably closer to making that 100% renewable. We could do that in the next couple of years if we can find the funding, which is relatively low. I think for under an additional $10,000 on top of what we're already paying, which is around $8,000, and then combined with some of what the state purchases, some of what WPS has to provide, and what residential living purchases, we could get to that 100% renewable electricity. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things to understand is that students have a lot of influence in terms of what our environmental footprint is for the campus. There are 3,000 students who live directly on campus who we provide energy for. So, if 3,000 students all decided that they're going to turn their thermostat down by, 2 degrees in the winter and 2 degrees in the summer from what they typically would, that's a huge amount of energy when you spread it across all of those people. So, I think understanding that, trying to empower students that every little bit helps is an important realization and learning point to try and reduce our environmental footprint. So, and then I think in the bigger scope of things, I think students are becoming more aware of the energy issues that our planet is dealing with. And I think more students are becoming aware that there's enough sun that hits the planet every day to, completely power everything that we need to do if we figure out how to harness it. And so I think that awareness, I think is becoming not so much an environmental issue as it is a common sense issue. Like we have a resource that will provide us with all the energy we need. We just need to figure out how to harness it. So I think that becoming a common sense issue speaks for that desire to move to a renewable energy platform across all mediums on campus, and students can help drive that by, clearly identifying that they have expectations that that's a direction we're moving in. And so that's part of what our office is trying to do, is to facilitate that momentum in a positive direction.
As we progress into the future of energy, we have to determine what sort of energy usage we're going to be using as a campus. Are we going to go towards the past with fossil fuels, or go towards the future with renewables? Right now, solar panel energy is currently at an all-time low, and increasing solar panel installations are happening more and more each year. This is a perfect time for the university to jump on the solar bandwagon and do something with those thermal panels on top of the HEC. Hopefully this segment taught you a little bit more about sustainable energy on campus. If you have any other questions, read the link below for the document about the solar panels on the HEC, and go and talk to Dave Barbier about sustainability on campus. Well, that about does it for Sustainability Tidbits this week. Stay tuned next time for another episode regarding dumpster diving and the secret underworld of getting your food from the trash with local 350 Stevens Point. Well, have a green day, Stevens Point.